how the TAMP saved advisors in 2020 and beyond. The TAMP became the core business platform that allowed advisors to survive and thrive under pandemic conditions. Imagine what it can do when times are good. Hey, welcome to the Rare Advisor, where we dive deep every discussion on recurring and repeatable events as the horsepower inside of your financial advisory practice. And today I'm going to keep it brief, but I want to share with you a little known secret of how advisors grew, not just survived, but thrived during the pandemic lockdowns. Not every advisor has figured this out in the greatest detail. Most understand that those who did best during the pandemic lockdowns had recurring revenue as a significant portion of their business. That's pretty logical. It makes a lot of sense. If you were relying entirely or the vast majority of your revenue comes from commissionable transactional sales and you can't physically get in front of customers the way you used to, then that obviously is going to suffer. And in many instances, in most instances, it's suffered dramatically. But recurring revenue, assets under management, tended to continue on. And people did very well as that being their foundational revenue component. It helped their P&L and it helped their balance sheet. But what many don't realize is the magic elixir inside of that equation was the TAMP, the Turnkey Asset Management Program. Because without the technological advancements of the TAMP, most could not function properly, even with assets under management. Because if they're dealing with SMAs, they have to go out and they have to individually open accounts. And if they want to move anything, they have to close this account, repaper something new, and move it over here, and so on and so forth. And then you're getting into having to deal with straight through processing and everything else. But if you're on a TAMP program, now inside of a single account, you can have numerous asset managers plus countless different models being assembled on the portfolio of that account in an individual account without having to do any of these other gyrations. Now, that sounds valuable enough just as it is and to be able to communicate and work with the investor. But think about what that does to your staff. Your staff is now all worked remote under lockdowns, most likely. And because of the TAMP platform, it was all digitized. It was all electronic, and they were able to do anything they needed to do. So if you had to rebalance the portfolio, if you had to readjust it, if you had to swap out asset managers, swap out models, you could do all of that from the computer keyboard. You did not have to repaper anything, and you could grow. And then you got introductions because your client's friends were dealing with all these extra difficulties that their friend was not dealing with, and suddenly you've got yourself a nice introduction. If you don't know how to get digital introductions, you need to work with USA Financial Protocol. That's a whole different discussion. I had a couple of videos on that recently with my good friend Steve Phillips. He heads up that subsidiary for us. Go take a look at those. But here, you're talking about streamlining of processes and systems. So let me do a quick share screen. I'm going to share some numerics with you to prove the point. And this could be your building block moving forward. So if you had a rough pandemic, if you had a rough time during the lockdowns, this is the time to fix that before it happens again. Something will happen again, mark my words, whether it's the 08-09 crisis, whether it's a dot-com bubble, whether it's an economic collapse, whether it's the stock market having a tremendous bear correction, whatever that might be, something's going to happen again. And you need to get this foundation created very, very quickly if you haven't already. And if it's already there, let's go build upon it because it's super valuable. So let me do a quick share screen. I'm going to keep this pretty brief for you, but it is super important. As I talked about how the TAMP saved advisors in 2020 and beyond. And I love this quote from Warren Buffett. Only when the tide goes out do you discover who's been swimming naked. Meaning that only when times are tough do you get to figure out who has a solid business model and who doesn't. This is the gap, the separation that took place between the value of recurring revenue and the shortcomings of commissionable or transactional revenue. Now, don't get me wrong. Every dollar, every check cashes the same. But how you create that dollar, how you create that next paycheck does not. And that's what we're talking about. So here at USA Financial, we fully embrace assets under management, assets under advisement. We actually have our three subsidiaries up here at the top are all there to support and help you. What I'm really going to talk about is over here on the right, USA Financial Exchange. That is our TAMP program that we built specifically for advisors to be able to execute the things I was talking about, plus a whole bunch more. I don't have time to get into all of that for you today, but if you go out to the Advisor Advancement YouTube channel, you can see a webinar we did on this not long ago that dives into all the mechanics of USA Financial Exchange. I think it'll be very valuable for you, but I want to share with you the elixir within the strategic formula. And that is being revealed based upon what 2020 looked like for people. So if we rank our top 40 individual advisors, not offices, just the individual advisors, on the earnings they received in 2020, we get this list of 40 individuals. And then look what happens here. We have this green column, and that shows their 2020 growth. If we go all the way down to the bottom, what you'll find is the average advisor grew by better than 5% during the pandemic, during 2020. Probably not a lot of organizations that can say that, and even fewer financial advisors that statistically can continually say that. So this is a pretty powerful scenario that you're looking at. And imagine what that means when you look at the 3-year. The 3-year growth rate for this group of advisors was 185%, and that included 2020, the pandemic. So imagine what things might have looked like if 2020 had been a normal year. So that's all that's all good and fine, and I'm very proud of that, and I'm thrilled with our advisors, and it's just a privilege to be connected with them. But if you dig another layer or two deeper, that's what gets really interesting. So we know everything changed in 2020. We know the client interactions and everything gets turned upside down. We know that what doesn't kill us makes us stronger. We know now that it's easier to deal with a snowbird client than it used to be because they know how to use Zoom and the grandkids taught them and all this other stuff. So we had this opportunity that took place during the pandemic, this growth curve or this learning curve that took place with the investor, with the consumer, that would have taken us decades. But instead, we got it done inside of a year thanks to the pandemic. So that's the good part. That's the value that we're going to carry and roll forward in all the other aspects of our business. But we found out more. What we also found out in looking at the numbers is that 95% of the people who had an increase, the advisors who had an increase in revenue, they had at least half of their revenue came from assets under management, from recurring revenue. So at least half or more came from recurring revenue, and they were able to leverage that. And 95% of them had an increase in revenue. The flip side, however, we found was also true. Of those who had negative growth in 2020, 87% of them had less than 25% of their revenue from assets under management, meaning they had at least 75% of their revenue from transactional or commissionable revenue. So only 25% came from the recurring revenue. If you don't have a recurring revenue base, that's like a factory not having an assembly line. You have to have the stability, the cornerstone of recurring revenue to create stability in your practice. That's why the Warren Buffett quote was so revealing, right? When the water rolled out, when the tide went out, suddenly we found who was swimming naked. We saw who had poor business models. It was all slam bam, thank you ma'am, trying to transactionally sell commissionable stuff. They weren't truly being advisors. Now, we do a tremendous amount of transactional revenue as well. So don't get me wrong, it all fits in the plan. But if the only way that you have to get new clients and new business to your firm is through a commission, then you do not have a solid business model the way you would want to weather the storm of a crisis, to weather the storm of a pandemic, and so on and so forth. So take a look at the TAMP program. If you're already using it and you need to step it up a bit, we'll work with you on that. If you don't have a TAMP program baked into your practice, baked into your systems and processes so it streamlines everything for you, your staff, and your clients, take that step forward. Whether it's with us, USA Financial Exchange, obviously, we'd love to work with you. But if not, do it with someone else, but get it done.